In the spring of 1946, as the United States began the massive operation of repatriating over 371,000 German prisoners of war held in camps across America, military authorities encountered an unexpected problem documented in numerous official reports and camp records. Thousands of German POWs, when informed they would be returned to Germany, expressed reluctance or outright refusal to go home. Some requested delays, others applied for extensions of their work assignments. A few attempted to desert or go into hiding. Many simply stated they did not want to return to Germany. For military authorities expecting grateful prisoners eager to reunite with families after years of separation, this resistance was puzzling and created significant administrative challenges. That opening statement, completely contradicted by documented evidence that reveals a complex story about why men who had fought for Germany came to prefer captivity in America over freedom in their homeland. The repatriation of Axis POWs from American custody began in 1945 and accelerated in 1946 following the war's end. Military records indicate that the process was intended to be orderly and systematic, with prisoners returned to Europe aboard the same Liberty ships that had brought them to America. The Geneva Convention required that POWs be repatriated promptly after hostilities ended, and the United States had both legal obligations and practical incentives to return prisoners quickly. Housing and feeding hundreds of thousands of POWs was expensive, and the War Department wanted to close the camps and redeploy resources to peacetime needs. But the actual repatriation process revealed complications that military planners had not fully anticipated. Records from camps across the United States document that significant numbers of German POWs expressed reluctance to return when repatriation schedules were announced. The scale of this reluctance is difficult to quantify precisely because many prisoners didn't formally refuse. They simply requested delays, applied for work extensions, or found other ways to postpone their departure. But camp commanders' reports from 1945 to 1946 consistently note the problem as significant enough to require attention. The reasons for this reluctance were multiple and complex, documented through camp records, interviews conducted by military authorities, letters, and post-war surveys. Understanding why German POWs didn't want to go home requires examining what they were leaving in America and what they knew they were returning to in Germany. By 1946, German POWs who had been in American captivity for 2 or 3 years had experienced living conditions that exceeded what most had known even before the war. Camp records consistently show that POWs received approximately 3,200 calories per day in varied high-quality meals. They lived in barracks with electricity, heating, indoor plumbing, and hot showers. They had access to medical care, dental care, recreational facilities, libraries, and educational programs. Those who worked received payment in camp scrip that could purchase cigarettes, candy, toiletries, and other items at camp canteens. Many had formed friendships with American guards or civilian workers. Some had developed relationships, though officially prohibited, with local communities, particularly in rural areas where POW labour was valued. The contrast with conditions in Germany by 1946 could not have been more extreme. Germany had been devastated by years of strategic bombing, ground combat, and finally Soviet occupation of eastern territories. Major cities lay in ruins, infrastructure had been destroyed, industrial capacity had been shattered. The German economy had collapsed, with currency nearly worthless and barter replacing normal commerce. Food scarcity had reached crisis levels, with civilian rations in some areas dropping below 1,000 calories per day, starvation level. Millions were homeless, living in cellars or ruins. Disease was rampant. The political situation was chaotic, with Germany divided into occupation zones controlled by powers that had recently been enemies. German POWs in America received information about conditions at home through letters from family members, though the mail system was disrupted and unreliable. The letters that did arrive painted a grim picture. Families described hunger, cold, destruction, and desperation. Many prisoners learned that their homes had been destroyed, their cities reduced to rubble, their family members dead, missing, or displaced. Those from eastern territories occupied by the Soviet Union faced particularly dire news. Many would never be able to return to their actual homes, which were now part of Poland or the Soviet Union, with German populations expelled or fled. The psychological impact of this information appears throughout documented sources from the period. Letters intercepted by camp censors in 1945 to 1946 show German POWs expressing dread about returning home. Many described guilt about living well while their families starved, but also reluctance to give up the security and comfort of camp life to face the devastation awaiting them in Germany. Some letters explicitly stated preferences for remaining in America if it were possible, but beyond the material conditions there were deeper reasons why some German POWs resisted repatriation, documented in post-war interviews and surveys. For many, especially younger prisoners who had spent formative years in American camps, the experience had fundamentally changed how they understood the world and their place in it. They had discovered that Nazi propaganda had been comprehensively false. They had witnessed American abundance, efficiency, and democracy firsthand. They had been treated with a humanity that contradicted everything they had been taught about racial enemies. They had absorbed, often unconsciously, American values and attitudes that made return to Germany psychologically as well as practically unappealing. Camp newspapers published by German POWs in late 1945 and early 1946 reveal this psychological conflict. Articles discuss Germany's defeat, the revelation of concentration camp atrocities, and the moral reckoning facing the German people. Some articles express determination to help rebuild Germany along democratic lines, but others reveal ambivalence or pessimism about Germany's future, and nostalgia for life in American camps where, despite being prisoners, they had experienced security, abundance, and fair treatment. One particularly significant factor documented in multiple sources was fear of what awaited them politically in Germany. As news of the Nuremberg trials and denazification programs reached the camps, German POWs realized that return to Germany might mean interrogation, prosecution, or at minimum suspicion and social stigma depending on their wartime activities and party affiliations. While most ordinary soldiers had little to fear legally, the atmosphere of collective guilt and the association with defeated Nazi Germany created psychological reluctance to return and face it. Those who had served in the Waffen-SS or other Nazi organizations faced more concrete fears. While the majority of POWs in America were regular Wehrmacht soldiers, some SS members were among the prisoner population. For them, return to Germany meant potential prosecution by Allied authorities or retribution from Germans seeking scapegoats. Some of these men attempted to conceal their SS membership or requested delays in repatriation, hoping the political situation would stabilize. Another factor appears in camp records and post-war accounts: relationships formed during captivity that prisoners were reluctant to leave. While fraternization between POWs and American civilians was officially prohibited, in practice many prisoners working on American farms or in American communities formed genuine friendships with their employers and neighbors. Some developed romantic relationships with American women, despite regulations prohibiting it. These relationships created emotional ties to America that made return to devastated Germany less appealing. Employment records show that many German POWs had acquired valuable skills during their captivity. Those who worked on American farms learned modern agricultural techniques and machinery operation. Those who worked in factories learned industrial skills. Those who participated in educational programs learned English, vocational skills, and trades. They recognized that these skills would be valuable in peacetime America, but might have limited application in ruined Germany, where machinery was destroyed and industrial capacity shattered. The work program itself created a perverse incentive structure, documented in camp administrative records. German POWs working for American farmers or businesses earned 80 cents per day in camp scrip. While this was modest compensation, it represented more purchasing power than most would have in post-war Germany, where currency had collapsed and goods were scarce. Some prisoners had accumulated significant savings in camp accounts that would become worthless upon return to Germany. They requested permission to continue working to maximize their earnings before mandatory repatriation. Military authorities faced a dilemma documented in War Department correspondence from this period. The Geneva Convention required prompt repatriation, but also prohibited forcing prisoners to return to conditions of danger or persecution. Some German POWs claimed they faced persecution if returned, either from Allied authorities investigating war crimes, or from Soviet authorities if they were from territories now under Soviet control. Adjudicating these claims required investigation and created delays. The Soviet occupation of Eastern Germany and former German territories created a particular problem. German POWs from East Prussia, Silesia, Pomerania, and other territories now controlled by Poland or the Soviet Union literally had no homes to return to. These territories had been ethnically cleansed of Germans, with populations killed, expelled, or fled. Repatriating these prisoners meant sending them to occupation zones in Western Germany, where they would arrive as displaced persons with no homes, no property, and no community connections. Many of these prisoners explicitly requested permission to remain in America rather than face this fate. The practical repatriation process itself was documented in military transportation records. German POWs were transported by train to East Coast ports, primarily New York and Norfolk, then loaded aboard Liberty ships for transport to Europe. The destination was typically France or Britain, where they would be transferred to Allied authorities for final repatriation to Germany. The process could take weeks or months, depending on transportation availability, creating opportunities for prisoners to delay or resist. Some forms of resistance were passive. Prisoners claimed illness requiring medical evaluation before travel. Others claimed administrative errors in their paperwork requiring correction. Some simply failed to appear when called for transport, hiding within the camp population or work details until the transport departed without them. Camp records document hundreds of such incidents across the POW camp system. More active resistance included escape attempts, though these were relatively rare. Records indicate that some German POWs attempted to disappear into American society rather than face repatriation. A few succeeded in evading capture, remaining illegally in America, and eventually legalizing their status through immigration channels years later. The exact number is impossible to determine, but post-war immigration records show dozens of cases of former German POWs who had entered the United States illegally during or shortly after repatriation operations and later regularized their status. The military authorities' response to resistance varied, documented in camp commanders' reports and War Department directives. Initially, resistance was met with disciplinary action, confinement, loss of privileges, forced transport under guard. But as the scale of reluctance became apparent, authorities adopted more flexible approaches. Prisoners with legitimate claims of persecution or lack of homes were given case-by-case consideration. Those with valuable work assignments were sometimes granted temporary extensions. Educational program participants were allowed to complete their courses before repatriation. The timeline of repatriation created additional complications. The process extended from 1945 into 1947, with most German POWs returned by mid-1946, but some remaining in American custody into 1947. The longer prisoners remained, the more integrated into American life they became, and the more reluctant to leave. Those repatriated in late 1946 or 1947 had spent 3 or 4 years in America, a significant portion of their lives, especially for younger prisoners who had entered captivity in their late teens or early 20s. Post-war surveys conducted in 1946 to 1947 provide statistical evidence of German POW attitudes toward repatriation. One survey found that approximately 23% of German POWs expressed strong reluctance to return to Germany, while another 31% expressed some reluctance. Only 46% indicated they were eager or ready to return home. When asked why they were reluctant, the most common responses were fear of conditions in Germany, 68%, lack of homes to return to, 42%, preference for living standards in America, 37%, and change political views making them uncomfortable in post-war Germany, 22%. These percentages add to more than 100% because prisoners could cite multiple reasons. The survey data also revealed generational differences. German POWs under age 25 showed significantly higher rates of reluctance to return. Approximately 35% expressed strong reluctance, compared to older prisoners. Younger prisoners had spent more of their formative years in American captivity, had adapted more fully to American life, and had less established lives to return to in Germany. Many had been drafted into military service directly from Hitler Youth, and had no adult experience of civilian life in Germany. Educational level also correlated with reluctance. German POWs with higher education or technical skills showed greater reluctance to return, likely because they recognized that their skills would be more valuable in intact America than ruined Germany. Farmers and agricultural workers showed mixed results. Those who had learned American farming techniques wanted to stay and apply them, while those with family farms in Germany wanted to return and help their families. Party affiliation, where it could be determined, showed complex patterns. Committed Nazis generally wanted to return to Germany despite its devastation, driven by loyalty to the homeland and rejection of America's democratic values. But former Nazi Party members who had undergone genuine ideological transformation during captivity often expressed reluctance, fearing the political reckoning awaiting them and preferring to start new lives elsewhere. Former Social Democrats, communists, or political opponents of the Nazi regime who had been conscripted into military service sometimes expressed willingness to return and participate in building democratic Germany, but others preferred to remain in America, having experienced freedom from political persecution. The role of families in Germany was complex and emotionally fraught, documented in letters between POWs and family members. Many prisoners expressed torn loyalties, desire to reunite with families versus reluctance to enter the devastation and face the guilt of Germany's crimes. Some family members wrote urging prisoners to stay in America if possible, recognizing that survival prospects were better there. Other families desperately needed prisoners to return and help with survival, reconstruction, or care of children and elderly relatives. The ultimate fate of German POWs who resisted repatriation varied. The vast majority were eventually repatriated, willing or not, as the United States fulfilled its Geneva Convention obligations. Military records indicate that by the end of 1947, virtually all German POWs had been returned to Europe, with fewer than 100 remaining in American custody due to ongoing legal or medical issues. But the experience left lasting impacts documented in various sources. Many German former POWs who were forced to return to Germany and experienced its devastation firsthand later immigrated to the United States through legal channels. Immigration records show approximately 5,000 German former POWs entered the United States as immigrants between 1948 and 1960. In immigration interviews, many explicitly cited their POW experience as motivation for immigrating, stating they had seen during captivity that America offered opportunities impossible in Germany. The correspondence between former POWs and American families or employers continued for decades, documented in archives and personal collections. Many prisoners maintained contact with farmers who had employed them, guards who had befriended them, or families who had sent them Christmas packages. These relationships sometimes facilitated later immigration, with Americans sponsoring former POWs as immigrants. Some former POWs arranged marriages to American women they had met during captivity, using marriage as a pathway to legal immigration. The refusal or reluctance of German POWs to return home represents a powerful testament to the psychological transformation that American captivity produced. These men had entered America as enemies, convinced of their racial and cultural superiority, committed to Nazi ideology and German victory. They left having experienced a system that fed them better, treated them more humanely, and offered greater opportunities than the regime they had fought for. The transformation was so complete for some that they preferred to remain as prisoners or illegal immigrants in America rather than return as free men to Germany. The reasons were practical. Germany was devastated while America was intact and prosperous. But they were also psychological and moral. Many German POWs had experienced a crisis of identity and values during their captivity. They had discovered that Nazi ideology was built on lies. They had witnessed what a democratic, multiracial society could achieve. They had been treated with dignity by people they had been taught to despise. Returning to Germany meant not just facing material hardship, but also confronting their complicity in a regime that had committed monstrous crimes and led their nation to catastrophic defeat. For some, remaining in America, even illegally, even as a fugitive, seemed preferable to that reckoning. For others, the desire to return and help rebuild Germany along democratic lines ultimately overcame reluctance, but only after delay and soul-searching. For still others, the ties formed to America during captivity remained so strong that they eventually returned as immigrants, completing a transformation from enemy soldiers to American citizens. The documented evidence of German POW reluctance to return home demolishes the myth that prisoners naturally desire above all else to return to their homelands. When the homeland offers only devastation, hunger, political chaos, and moral reckoning, while captivity offers security, abundance, and dignity, some prisoners rationally prefer captivity. The fact that thousands of German POWs resisted repatriation delayed as long as possible, or later immigrated back to America demonstrates the power of lived experience to override even the deepest bonds of nationality and culture. That opening statement, claiming every German prisoner wanted to return immediately, the evidence proves it spectacularly false. Many didn't want to go home at all, and some refused, choosing the uncertainty of resistance, illegal status, or delayed return over the certainty of devastation and reckoning awaiting them in defeated Germany.